Despite Labor and the Coalition relying heavily on coal mining seats in Queensland and New South Wales to form majority government, both major parties refuse to give the coal and gas industries the support they deserve. Instead, they pay lip service to the local concerns of coal communities while continuing with a policy of net zero, which will damage regional areas, our energy security and, of course, the federal budget. It's hypocrisy writ large, and just like me, a number of coal executives are fed up. In a speech today to the Sydney Mining Club, Chief Executive of Adani Australia, Lucas Dowell, called for the nation's political leaders to support the establishment of a coal industry mutual insurance fund. This would ensure that coal and gas projects, as well as the businesses that support them, can continue to have access to insurance and cash as the banks and insurance companies move away from backing fossil fuels. Without political support, Dow says that the coal industry, which represents Australia's second most lucrative export and is expected to generate in excess of $100 billion this financial year in terms of export value, will be put at risk. Lucas Dowell joins me now from Sydney. Lucas, thank you for your time. A really important speech today in the climate of this election campaign, important at any time, to be honest. My view is no, coal is critical to our prosperity, but talk me through the challenges your industry is facing, abandoned by the banks, abandoned by insurers. This has got to be tough.
Good evening, Peter. Yes, absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. The coal industry is Australia's second largest export industry, and the chief economist from the government expects that to top $100 billion this financial year. But the real challenge is that the nation, and in particular regional Australia's prosperity, is being put at risk by the withdrawal of financial and insurance services by the banks and the insurance sector. And in particular, this has been largely led out of places like Europe and so forth. And the real concern, Peter, that we've got is at the larger end, we'll typically find a way through those. But the real concern are the folks in places like Moranbah and Middlemount, Claremont, Townsville and Rockhampton, who simply because, and we're talking about mum and dad type operations with 10 or 15 employees that service the coal sector, and they're being told that if they service the coal sector, even for a portion of their business, that banks won't do business with them and they can't get insurance. And really that's what I'm concerned about and really what we're seeking. And we don't think this should be a partisan issue. Both sides of politics should be aligned on this to be able to afford the folks in regional Australia, and particularly the coal mining communities, the support that they'd so desperately need to ensure the ongoing prosperity of the sector.
I just can't fathom. We can be in a situation in this country, we're talking about billions of dollars of election promises. We want all of this social welfare. We want the standard of living we currently have, perhaps even better over time. All that's got to be paid for, and coal and gas revenues are critical to the federal budget. It doesn't matter, though, what governments are deciding in Canberra if all of these private companies and listed companies are basically shutting you down by default. What's this insurance fund you want to get up?
So, Peter, we've had a look at it, and one of the things about us coal miners is that we're pretty resilient and we'll find a way through these. So we've been working through the Minerals Council of Australia, and we've commissioned some work. Effectively, we can stand up a mutual industry fund. So it's a type of self-insurance that'll effectively cover the entire value chain of the sector. So it will pick up the mum and dad operations and right through the value chain across railways and also onto ports. In short, we'll be contributing into a fund to be able to reinsure ourselves. But obviously, to get that off the ground initially, we'll be requiring some backing from the federal government. Importantly, it's not a handout. We're not seeking any cash. It's simply there as a backstop if there is an unforeseen circumstance. But our fund, on all the modelling, will be up and self-sufficient within 5 years. So this is about safeguarding the prosperity of regional Australia and in particular the coal sector by being able to provide a clear way to ensure that banking, financial and insurance services are available for the industry and, importantly, the business that service the industry.
This is very much the same as the Morrison government's plan for housing, where they don't put money into people's homes, but first home buyers have the backing of the government when they go to get their loan if they qualify for the scheme. Now, given it mirrors an existing policy of the government, what's been their response?
So, Peter, you're absolutely right. What we're seeing here is a market failure, and it's largely driven by the insurers and the banks out of places like Europe and the US. I mean, frustratingly and in some ways, ironically and terribly sad, on the back of the Ukraine conflict, the Europeans turned immediately to the Australian coal sector to be able to fill the gap that the Russian sanctions have created. So there is a certain level of irony that those folks that effectively have been trying to kill off the Australian sector are now looking for the Australian sector to come to their rescue. But as you described, in these instances of market failures, there are clear examples. We've seen in Northern Australia, the cyclone reinsurance plan, effectively that's underwritten by the government. We've seen the banks with guaranteed deposits. There's also domestic gas mechanisms to ensure that there's supply there locally. So there's a clear demonstration of government intervention in this space. And again, we're not looking for a handout. This would be a contingent liability only. And it's essentially for us to get up and going and safeguard coal mining communities and ultimately the prosperity of the nation, because we are proud of the contribution we make. We pay our taxes, we generate the royalties that go towards things like the NDIS that help to pay for the defence services, that effectively pay for the roads and the schools and so forth in the respective states. So we are proud of what we do. We're just simply looking for politicians on both sides of the debate to get behind us and back the industry.
You are so right to remind people. I mean, I always say to the Green Zealots, but for fossil fuels, what's going to replace it in the budget? Because your idea of renewables, I say to them, it bleeds money. Fossil fuels have made this country rich and are giving us all these social programs that you all love to spend money on. But you made the point there about Europe and this sort of come to Jesus moment that the issue with the Russian gas is delivered. I know we've just sent Australia 70,000 tonnes of thermal coal to Ukraine as part of our support package. I know the UK is looking at its first coal mine in 30 years. I mean, the issues out of Ukraine have woken them up from this 30-year stupor on this green religion. Do you think we're going to have that same introspection come and hit us here in Australia, that we're going to wake up and understand that energy security and national security are critically linked?
Peter, I think the tragic circumstances that we're seeing unfold in Ukraine are going to bring that home to bear. We're already seeing geopolitical risk being considered as it relates to the supply of energy, what are those logistics chains and so forth. And this is obviously a pivotal moment for the globe, but also for the Australian coal mining sector in terms of which markets that we're going to be positioned to service. And certainly the world's largest democracy in India, it represents a prime market for us to be able to continue to build relations and increase our export volumes too.
And I know your coal goes to India, where 1/5 of the homes don't even have power. So talk about changing lives. Lucas Dow, thank you for your time. Great speech today too.